What I kind of came back to as I ran through that exercise was that for an additional 100 pounds of mature cow size, I needed about 50 more pounds of weaning weight to justify those additional costs.
That's a simple number, but it does raise some big questions for a lot of us as cow-calf operators. Dr. Kenny Burdine from the University of Kentucky returns as our guest today as we not only discuss cow size and weaning weights, but the value of consistency in our calf crop.
The difference in a truckload and a single was about 21 cents a pound. That's a big number.
That is.
But the real story to me was how much improvement I got as I saw those lot sizes increase a little bit.
Today we're talking cow size, weaning weight, consistency, and market signals shaping 2026 on this episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. Well, we like to tell ourselves and even our neighbors that we're running 1,200-pound mature cows, but if we put a set of scales, that may not always be the case. Hi, everyone. Justin Mills here, host of the Working Ranch Radio Show. Good to have you with us on our program today. As you heard there in the opening, a great conversation with Dr. Kenny Burdine on that subject of cow weights, cow size, and weaning weights, and we're going to talk consistency as well. So tune in, stick around for that. Also want to mention that coming on later on in the program, we're going to be talking with Jeremy Martin and Travis Chrisman with Stockman Source Bull Sale, their 13th annual sale coming up on the 7th of February. So we'll visit with them a little bit about that. And then, of course, meteorologist Don Day will be in as we take a look at our long-range weather. It's going to be reaching out into the middle of February to give us an idea of what he is anticipating for weather across the country. Hey, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to listen to the last few episodes. For those of you that are regular listeners and caught up, appreciate you doing that. But if you did miss something, you want to go back and listen to it, you can go on any podcast site. And of course, you can also pick it up on our podcast site at workingranchradio.com. But we've really had some great shows that are very practical, very fundamental to us as ranchers that I encourage you to go back and listen to. We started the year off in January 10th with episode 239. Jared Wareham joining us as we were talking just markets, expansion, and capital, just a conversation looking ahead for the 2026 year. Then Jared Boardman joined us on the episode 240, a great conversation there. Is your replacement genetics holding your herd's profitability hostage? And if you want to know how we went with that conversation, go and listen to that one. And then last week, John Maddox with Maddox Cattle Company joined us as the overarching theme was when emotion meets discipline in the cow herd, and a great conversation with him in terms of what he has done on his ranching operation in Nebraska there, some of the things that they've done, just picking his mind on depreciation of your cattle and how you manage that, and just encourage you to go back and listen to that one. Now, speaking of John Maddox, Maddox Cattle Company, they're going to be having their maternalizer mature bred cow herd dispersal phase 2 sale. That's going to be coming up on Saturday out on March 7th. That's going to be at Ogallala Livestock Auction in Ogallala, Nebraska, selling about 3,000 head of home-raised maternalizer bred females. And if you want to know how they do their program, listen to last week's show, and you're going to be thoroughly impressed. A good set of replacement cattle that you're going to pick up there at Ogallala on the 7th of March for Maddox Cattle Company with that sale. Hey, by the way, the latest issue of Working Ranch Magazine is going to be coming out pretty soon here, and with that in mind, if you don't have a subscription, you can get one started by going to workingranchmag.com, and you can get your subscription started here today. Hey, I know this is the season for a lot of national conventions this past month. We've already seen American Farm Bureau Federation having theirs, U.S. Cattlemen's Association having theirs. Upcoming will be the Cattle Convention in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm looking forward to being there and visiting with folks there. Make sure you stop by the booth, the Working Ranch Magazine booth, and meet all of us there with the Working Ranch Magazine as well as myself. Coming up, though, in February later on, about February 7th through the 11th, the Society for Range Management, SRM, having their annual meeting. That's going to be in Monterey, California this year. I'd encourage you, if you can't make to that trip, make it all the way down there to California. I would encourage you to check out online. They probably have some of that stuff online as well. But if you can make it and you want to get registered or find out more information, you can go to their website at rangelands.org. Well, let's turn towards our subject at hand here today. And joining us on the program, or back with us, I should say, is Dr. Kenny Burdine. He is ag economist, professor, beef specialist at the University of Kentucky. And Dr. Burdine, good to have you back here today on the Work and Ranch Radio Show.
Thanks. I'm glad to be back with you, Justin.
Well, before we started here, we were both kind of joking a little bit about the fact that both of us have dogs that could come into our office at any point in time. And you were talking about your dog situation, how you compromised with your wife. Explain that.
Well, I tell people about 12 years ago, she wanted a dog and I really didn't want a dog. So we compromised and got a dog, and he's a little over 12 years old now.
So, hey, that means, your marriage is still going together because you found compromise. That's a good thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Let's not digress here. Let's get back into the main subject here. Today, as I had told folks previously, we're going to start here talking about some cow size, weaning weights, some correlations to that, and really kind of making folks step back and think about that a little bit. Then later on, we're going to talk some more economic numbers and things like that. But first, let's get into the cow size and weaning weights. It's something that you have talked a little bit with producers there in your own home state of Kentucky there. But at the same time, I think that conversation resonates in our industry as a whole, because as I had said to you before, there's confusion in our industry, I feel right now, because we keep kind of talking with folks about the fact that we do need to watch the weights of our cattle. And are they bringing in a calf that's comparable to that size? And I think you're going to give us some numbers to base that off of. Yet at the same time, the conflict is coming in our industry now because we're harvesting these cattle at much higher weights than we were 3-4 years ago. So with that conflict, I'm going to throw all that out there. And your thoughts in terms of cow size and our weaning weights.
So you make a really good point, Justin, about the current market. And, you can't ignore where things are now. Obviously, we've got incentives in place via expensive cattle and relatively inexpensive feed, that the incentive really is to take cattle heavier weights. And, to the extent that matches up with frame size, I think that's certainly what we're seeing today. What I talk about with producers when I get into this cow size discussion, and for reference, I'm in a feeder cattle state, largely a cow calf state. So we're mostly selling calves at weaning, or we're taking calves post weaning through some sort of growing type program. But the way that I like to frame it is that, really well managed operations have got really good records, and they can track those individual calves back to their sire and dam, or at least their dam, right? And they know what they weigh at weaning, they know what they sell for, and they can kind of track revenue on a per cow basis. And of course, the cost side is much harder to get a handle on for a cow-calf operation. And I like to say even your best cow-calf operations, what they really know is they know what it costs them to maintain an average cow. And that's an important distinction, because if you make decisions with that average cow maintenance cost in the back of your mind, and you overlay that with production records where you've got individual weaning weights, and you look at some of those cows with lower weaning weights as culling candidates, and you don't also think about their mature weight, they're the size of those cows, you're probably going to be slowly, whether you intend to or not, you're going to be culling some of your smaller cows over time, which drives your average cow weight higher and drives cost up over time. That's the gist of it. That if I'm looking at average production costs and individual weaning weights, if I'm not careful, I can find myself selecting over time for larger cows.
I think when we start looking at that, the one thing that we're not taking into account in some ways is the amount of more feed consumption that cow is taking in. And I know I was just starting to pull up that index. I don't have it in front of me, but I know there's a feed index that I reference a lot of times. Of course, the basis is on 1,000-pound cow at 1, I think is what that is. And then it goes up from there. Those numbers, if you plug that in, that really does spell that difference from a cost perspective, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And, the 1,000-pound cow is a really small cow, but it's a great base because it makes the percentages pretty easy to think about. So the way I like to describe it is if you think about a 1,000-pound cow, and then let's just say a 1,400-pound cow, 400 pounds difference. It's hard to observe this, but that 1,400-pound cow, she's going to consume more hay in the winter. She's going to consume more pasture during the grazing season. A lot of other costs are probably going to be impacted by her size. And, years ago, I tried to put together some estimates on this. And basically, I did kind of what you described. I took our basic cow-calf budget and I kind of ran it for 1,000-pound cow, 1,200-pound cow, 1,400-pound cow, and 1,600-pound cow. And I tried to adjust hay intake, pasture maintenance cost. I tried to adjust those things that I thought pretty much went up proportionally with cow size. Then I tried to think about other things that probably went up semi-proportionally. So I'm thinking about things like health programs, transportation, things like that. And there's a few things that may or may not go up with cow size, of course, too. Some things are going to be fixed and aren't going to be affected so much. Mm-hmm. But, what I kind of came back to as I ran through that exercise was that for an additional 100 pounds of mature cow size, I needed about 50 more pounds of weaning weight to justify those additional costs. And I've always kind of had that in the back of my mind. It's not that larger cows are a problem. It's just that they're only a problem if they're not weaning enough additional calf weight to justify those additional costs. And although we may not see it, those larger cows, like you say, based on that index you're describing, absolutely cost us more to keep.
Yeah. All right. Just so we're all on the same page, but what's kind of the rule of thumb that we want these old girls bringing in every fall?
So the way I like to look at it was kind of from a base. So what I basically said was for every additional 100 pounds of mature cow size, I need about 50 more pounds of calf weaning weight. Years ago, a lot of folks talked about a cow weaning 50% of her body weight. And that brings us back to that same point at the margin, if you will. So that's also something good to keep in the back of your mind. And I also don't want to ignore the current market. We're in an astronomically high market. I'm well aware of the fact that, she probably doesn't need to wean as large a percent of her body weight in 2026 as she would have back in 2021 or 2022. But I also think long term, as we think about making culling decisions, we want to not just look at weaning weight, but also look at that in proportion to the mature size of those cows.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to throw this out to the listeners, and maybe somebody will text or email or whatever. Is anybody getting 50%? I mean, let's be real. Are we getting 50%? I mean, that's saying let's just take a 1,200-pound cow. That's a 600-pound calf. Weaning a 600-pound calf. How many months are we doing this at? I mean, what would you say, Dr. Burdine, on that as far as, let's say May, they calve the 1st of May so that let's wean them. Of course, people have different weaning strategies, so there's a variable. I don't know. I mean, kind of throw your thoughts here on this.
Probably think in terms 7-8 months, something like that. But, that's the danger of using that percentage, right? And that's what I like to think about. I like to think about how much I need to justify additional mature cow size. Depending on at what age I wean my calves, for example, do I creep feed? All of those kind of things are going to impact. They're going to impact that weaning weight. Yeah. So I like to think about it more, not so much what percent do I need of a mature cow size, but if I've got cows of different size, if I've got cow A weighs 200 pounds more than cow B, how much more should I expect from cow A?
Yeah. That brings up another point. And I think let's take a break here. And as you just said that sentence right there, it led me down another thought I want to talk about real quick. And that's talking about consistency in our herds, in our cattle in our herd. I want to flesh that conversation out. We'll do that after the break.
With rising feed costs and an increased focus on sustainability within the beef industry, feed efficiency is more than a buzzword. It's rapidly becoming a battle cry in an industry challenged to do more with less. By incorporating today's Limousine and Limflex genetics into your planned crossbreeding program, you can capitalize on the breed's inherent feed efficiency advantage and moderate cow size, while still banking the premiums paid for high-quality, high-yielding carcasses. That's 2 ways to profit instead of 1. Let Limousine and Limflex deliver dollars to your bottom line. Limousine today, profit tomorrow.
Your herd needs protein. When the seasons shift, so do your herd's protein needs. SmartLick protein tubs deliver consistent nutrition that drives performance, helping cattle make the most of available forages, maintain condition and power through winter efficiently, giving you peace of mind. Feed smarter, not harder. Go to smartlick.com. That's smartlic.com to find your dealer.
All right, Dr. Burdine, as we left in the last segment, I said you started down a road here with a comment that I want to go just a little bit further, as we are overall the theme here talking about cow size and weaning weights and just trying to get some index numbers that I think you shared with us that I think make a lot of sense. I really like what you said. For every 100 pounds of cow that we have, in order to justify that, we need another 50 pounds of that calf in weaning weight. That's a great benchmark, a great number to look at. You also mentioned something about, we got this cow that weighs 1,400, this cow's 1,200, this cow, and I think consistently, this was something that I've thought about many years ago, talking with folks. Of course, it was definitely down the road of AIing and have some consistency in your calf crop, but cow consistency in your herd. And I know some people maybe don't have that luxury in some ways, but if you can get to that overall is going to help some of this.
I think it definitely will. So, I like to kind of simplify the world sometimes and think through things. And if you just think about a relatively small cow-calf operation, and you think about, okay, I'm going to sell however many calves I'm going to sell at a time. The more consistent those are in terms of how they look and what they weigh, the more of them that are going to stay together and be sold in groups when they sell. And those larger groups are going to tend to sell for a higher price per pound than those smaller groups. So, for example, we did some work back, it's probably been 10 or so years ago now, using data from our preconditioned feeder cattle sales and holding everything else constant. So, to be clear, same grain market, same cattle market, same everything. Everything except how many calves ran through the ring at one time in a lot. The difference in a truckload and a single was about 21 cents a pound. That's a big number.
That is.
But the real story to me was how much improvement I got as I saw those lot sizes increase a little bit. By the time I got to 5 calves that sold together as opposed to a single, I was getting almost half of that benefit. And by the time I got to a group of 10 as opposed to a single, I was getting about 2/3 of that lot size benefit. So what I always say was we'd all love to be moving truckloads of feeder cattle or calves, but most of us don't do that. But I've got to find ways to get out of the business of having calves move in groups of 1, 2, and 3. Even groups of 5 and 10 give the buyer so much more to work with and so much more that I can do to add value that it makes a difference on the bottom line.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know for our operation out here, our cattle operations are a little bit larger, so I'm thinking in pot loads and that sort of a thing. But at the same time, the same basis of understanding that, I take 10 head of calves to sale barn. I'm not going to get what I got from those that I got off the pot load that I just sent out the corral. And so I think that happens only with the consistency element. And I think that's a big deal, down to even color, whether we like it or not, isn't it?
It's consistency, I think, in 3 areas. You mentioned color, absolutely. Like it or not, it does matter. And I always say it's not always a particular color that's best in every market. It's a matter of, what can I put groups together of, right? It's that simple. Number 2, we've been talking obviously about mature cow size, and to the extent that impacts weaning weight of calves, that matters. And then we've not got into this yet before, but calving season matters too, right? Mm-hmm. Those late calving cows that are going to wean calves at a younger age are also going to weigh less, and they're going to be some of those that tend to sell in some of those smaller groups. So I think it's consistency across those three broad areas.
Yeah. And I want to be clear too, when we say late calving cows, that's late calving cows in your herd, not necessarily cows for folks that are calving May, June, that we all call ourselves late calvers. But you're talking about like out of a set of cows, and you put bulls out for 50, 60 days, and it's those that are on the tail end of that are going to be the ones that get peeled off or something like, and that's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Absolutely. The ones that get bred in later cycles, not those first cycle or two.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, so, some very good thoughts on that. And I think some very basic principles in that we can look in this. When we continue, through this in terms of cow size and weaning weights, anything else that kind of comes to mind with that conversation that is pertinent to folks as they're listening?
I think, the element beyond that we think about as far as adding value is we move towards things like health program management, those types of things. So I like to kind of think about, we add value to calves in layers. Grouping and numbers tend to be the first layer. And then it becomes kind of health programs of quality and things like that. So you can't get away from those basic marketing strategies or marketing functions. I always say your best bet in any market, whether it be a good market or bad market, is you want to sell the kind of calves the market wants. And that's typically your best protection against any sort of downside risk at all.
Yeah, very good. Okay, as I said, we were going to talk cow size, weaning weights, and I think it's a good way we can segue into a little bit more of the economic side of things and maybe looking at some more recent numbers as we were just talking a little bit about marketing. Let's kind of go down that road a little bit, but first, I know we got an inventory report that's going to be coming out here after we have this show, but it's going to definitely tell us where we're at. We've had a recent cattle on feed report that kind of gives us a little bit of a clue what we're going to see, don't we?
Yeah, so the cattle on feed report that came out, so it would have been roughly a week ago from when this will air. Not a ton of surprises. The big picture number, total cattle on feed number is down about 3%. The number, though, that really kind of stood out, I guess if I was going to say there's a headliner to that cattle on feed report, it was that placement number, which was down about 5% from a year ago. So, just to be sure we're talking apples to apples here, Justin, we're comparing placements in December of 2025 to placements in December of 2024, and that was down by a little over 5%. And this is important because, our first exposure to New World screwworm was in late November of 2024. So we're comparing December 2025 to December 24 when there were no imports from Mexico in either month. So the fact that we're 5% lower than that number in December 2024 to me is a pretty big thing. Although the trade did anticipate it, it speaks to just how tight these feeder cattle supplies are as we go into 2026.
Yeah. Okay, let's take another break here. When we come back, I want to continue a little bit more on this. I've got one question at least on the Mexican screwworm deal that I want to just throw out, kind of see what your thoughts are on that. And then also just kind of as for ranchers from our perspective, as we start looking ahead into the year, maybe just some things to throw in our thoughts and ideas to be aware of. So I want to do that when we come back, okay?
Sounds good.
Horn flies stressing your cattle? Make fly control one and done with Alticid IGR XRB. Alticid IGR XRB delivers season-long horn fly control from a single application bolus, providing up to 195 days of relief regardless of mineral consumption or location. It breaks the horn fly life cycle with no impact on beneficial insects, giving you flexible, consistent control. Learn more at cargillanimalnutrition.com/Alticid bolus.
Calving season is a favorite time of year, but along with that special time are dangers, extra stress, and increased labor. Safety Zone calf catchers are all about safety and making processing new calves easier. Designed for ATVs or UTVs, one person can do the job and never be threatened by the protective mother cow. Make this and every calving season safer and easier with a Safety Zone calf catcher. Watch videos and customer testimonials or order yours today at safetyzonecalfcatchers.com or call 877-505-0914. Affordable and made in the USA. Make your upcoming and all future calving seasons safer, easier, and stress-free. Durable and designed to work anywhere you can drive your ATV or UTV. Order online at safetyzonecalfcatchers.com or call 877-505-0914 today.
Dr. Kenny Burdine at the University of Kentucky, our guest here today. And before we jump into the question I left at the break about the Mexican screwworm, I want to go back to that cattle on feed report, because one of the things that was in there, again, a year ago when you were joining us, we were talking about, what are the big four questions that we hope to see the industry answer in 2025. That was about a year ago. And I think one of those questions still is on there a little bit, although this cattle on feed report, when we look at these heifers numbers, giving us some indication that we're definitely seeing the lowest herd numbers. Are we seeing any retention, though?
Yeah, that was, these quarterly on feed reports have been really our best indication of what's going on with retention. Now, by the time this airs, we'll have those January 1, 2026 inventory numbers. But we look at heifers as a percent of total on-feed inventory that we get every quarter. So this is the January 1 estimate. And they came in at 38.7%. So to put this in perspective, you and I had this same conversation, I think roughly almost exactly a year ago, I think, Justin. And it's almost unchanged from where it was January 1 of 2025, ironically. So that's not moved that much. It's even a little bit higher than it was on October 1st. So truth is, I do think we're holding back some heifers, but not at a scale that suggests that we're going to see major changes because of that. We harvested or slaughtered about 500,000 fewer beef cows in 2025. So that number alone, I think, is going to probably suggest that beef cow number is going to be a little higher to start the year in 2026. But again, it's more through reduced culling than it is through heifer retention. So we're simply growing the herd right now, I think, by hanging on to these cows a little bit longer. And it probably makes sense because we culled this cow herd pretty hard back in 2022, 2023.
Yeah. Okay, I want to have a little bit of a discussion here on the Mexican screwworm. I think there was some indications, or a lot of us felt like maybe we would see this topic go away a little bit as winter moved in, but it's not. And so what are you hearing on that front? And I know we're still not allowing Mexican cattle in, but what are you hearing on that front?
I'm probably hearing the same thing as you are, and I'll kind of stay in my lane here as an economist, but I was seeing the same things you were seeing, towards the end of 2025. A lot of the statements that were made by the secretary and by some of the officials suggested that they wanted to move towards opening the border. I think a lot of us expected fewer cases in the winter, but we had, 2 or 3 during the month of January? Mm-hmm. So it really hasn't gone away. We don't have one in the U.S. yet, obviously, but the fact that we're still seeing them in Mexico, I think it keeps pushing back the possibility of that reopening.
Yeah. Let's look real quick. I know some of the other things you're very, very aware of, especially when we talk about the economic side of things, is there was some reports this fall in terms of competing meats. We're always dealing with that in the beef industry of understanding, where's poultry, where's pork. What do you know on that?
Yeah, really, really good question. So, I go back to kind of 14, 15, and so many people talked about how long strong calf prices would hold. And it was based on how long it would take us to grow the cow herd. And the reality is that's absolutely important. And I think this current cattle cycle is going to be a slow expansion, but we can't ignore what's going on with our major competing meats, pork and poultry being the big ones. We are seeing a lot of the same factors in other species. For example, we are seeing more birds, and we're seeing birds taken to higher weights. You mentioned pork. I've been a little bit surprised we're not seeing growth in the breeding herd inventory for hogs. But we're very productive. And, that December 1 hogs and pigs report came in, breeding inventory was down about 1%. But when you think about, pigs per litter, litters per year, weights, all those things, we're going to see probably 1.5%, 2% increase in pork production in 2026. So we have to keep an eye on those things. We're not seeing production of pork and poultry at the same level that we saw back in 14 and 15. By that, I mean, we're not seeing the increases that we saw back then. But we are going to see, I think, increases in both competing meats this year, which will put a little bit more protein out there to consumers.
Yeah. Okay, as we kind of wrap up our conversation, and I know you've released your overview and economic outlook for the state of Kentucky, but just in general, I know a lot of that basis on what all of us are dealing with in North America. I'm going to say the United States and Canada with our beef industry as a whole. So with that in mind, as you look ahead and kind of outlook for 2026, we've talked about some things that part of that outlook, but some final takeaways that you should be maybe looking at planning for.
So supply fundamentals remain very, very strong. This cow herd is small, on-feed numbers are low. If we start seeing more heifer retention, that just reduces, the amount of feeder cattle in the system. The importation of live cattle from Mexico is a bit of a wild card, but I'd like to remind folks that even if we started that right away, we're still looking probably 6 months or more before that impacts fed cattle supply. So from a supply picture, things look really good. I look for another very good year in 2026. The wild card's on the demand side. There was a lot of discussion about trade, international demand in 2025. That's not going to go anywhere in 2026. Consumer demand absolutely matters. We mentioned competing meats. So I'm optimistic, but I always think that, risk management's important. And I think I would encourage anybody to think about things they can do to protect, downside price risk in a year like 2026. Another way to say it is we've got a good opportunity here. Let's not let it get away.
Yeah, cover your bases if you can. It's a good way to look at that. So, all right. Well, Dr. Burdine, good to have you back here on the program. Always enjoy the conversation. I like where we started here today on the subject of cow size and weaning weights. Appreciate the numbers that you threw out there. I think that gives us some baseline to evaluate our own operations. And I know as we were talking before, we do have mixed signals in our industry when it comes to cow size, don't we? You kind of got people doing two different things.
It is. And I always kind of remind folks that, breeding stock are a long-term investment, 6, 8, 10, 12 years. So you can't make breeding decisions. You can't make cow-calf decisions based on an individual year. You've got to make those decisions with kind of a long-run perspective. And that's kind of how I guess I would leave that discussion is don't get wrapped up in a single year. Think about long run and where I want to be down the road.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. And I think that maybe resolves that conflict that we have out there. And again, we're in the time of the year where a lot of breeding decisions are being made as we speak, aren't they?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Dr. Burdine, good to have you here today on the program. Look forward to catching up with you again down the road.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And again, that was Dr. Kenny Burdine out of the University of Kentucky joining us here today on the program. Some great dialogue there, sharing with us some information that I think would be very helpful as we look ahead in the management of our ranch operations into 2026. Well, we referenced a bit ago about a lot of folks making breeding decisions as it is a time of the year. We see a lot of bull sales going on. We're going to be talking with Jeremy and Travis with Stockman Source Bull Sale. Their sale's coming up on the 7th of February. We're going to talking with those guys coming up next after the break. This segment today brought to you by No Fence, grazing management built for freedom. Find out more at nofence.com.
Imagine keeping your cattle exactly where you want them while being able to tap into insights powered by a collar and an app. No Fence is the world's first virtual fencing system for grazing livestock. From the palm of your hand and delivered with GPS technology, you can set and move pasture boundaries, gain insight into grazing patterns, receive reduced animal activity alerts, and more. No wires, no posts, just empowered grazing that supports healthier land and your herd goals. 10,000 plus producers globally already trust No Fence. Explore the possibilities at nofence.com.
Capitalize on crossbreeding with Gelbvieh and Balancer bulls. Raise replacement females with added fertility, increased longevity, and greater productivity. Gelbvieh and Balancer influence females wean more pounds of calf per cow exposed. In the feed yard, Balancer influenced cattle offer increased performance, improved feed efficiency, and have excellent carcass merit. Balancers add the pounds, make the grade, and deliver the value. This year, make your crossbreeding count with Gelbvieh and Balancer genetics.
Well, as we continue on here on the Working Ranch Radio Show, joining me now is Jeremy Martin and Travis Chrisman. They are with Stockman Source Bull Sale. That's coming up on the 7th of February. And guys, you and I have been back and forth here the last several years talking about your upcoming sale and also just the program in general. And I always like to just visit more than anything. Yeah, we can talk the bull sale and get the information out to folks, but I also like to just know from your guys' standpoint, just our industry right now, of course, as I started our conversation when you guys jumped on here today, I said it's a good time to be in the cow business. And it was interesting because, Jeremy, you mentioned the fact that many of the decisions that you guys make, you and Travis make in all of this is really coming back to a financial decision. When we're looking at replacing and adding genetics to our industry, it's going to cost some money to do that. And so we want to get longevity out of our program. And you're 13 years into this, you're at a point now that many of the decisions and what you've made and going forward purely out of a financial aspect of it, and longevity hangs right in the balance of that.
Yeah, absolutely, Justin. I mean, I would like to think that we're ranchers first and foremost and seed stock guys after that. And so I hope someday my legacy is not so much as a bull guy, but as somebody who is good at ranch management in general, right? Mm-hmm. And so all of those decisions as far as the genetics go back to how does it impact our profitability? How does it impact our customers' profitability? And in a lot of cases, we are a customer of our customer as well. And so, I mean, things kind of come full circle in that third generation. And so all of those decisions genetically, I remember being told a long time ago, and I can't remember who, or I'd give them credit for it, but you can't select for something that you don't put into the blender, right? And so to that end, we focus our embryo program on older cows. I mean, our average donor cow's a teenager, just to make sure that we're, making longevity a really purposeful goal of our program.
Mm-hmm. Travis, I want to go to you next because I asked both you and Jeremy before we started here today, as all of us as ranchers do, we're constantly just going through in our head, how do we improve? What do we need to do? Where's the industry at? What are some management decisions or things that we need to prep for or do? I thought it was interesting because I asked you that question and it was a total different answer than I had expected from you. And you talked about in our industry that, there's going to have to be a process in which we have a better job of defining red meat yield. And as I thought about your answer to that, I liked it because, and I want you to explain why, but I liked it because I think it's really for thinking where potentially our industry needs to be. And when you're buying genetics today, you need to be thinking ahead for the next 3, 4, 5 years out from that. So explain, when your answer to me was defining red meat yield, why you think that's an important segment of our industry to understand, and especially as it relates back to your breeding program.
Yeah, Justin, I've been thinking about that a lot. I listened to a presentation from Dr. Dale Warner at Texas Tech. And, our industry's been super focused on marbling, and it's been great. We're getting paid for it, and our customer wants that, and we got to keep that to the front and foremost of what we do also. But we have got a lot of extra fat on these cattle, and we've lost some muscle over the years. And our current system just does not define red meat yield very well. So, they're working on ways to do that better, and I'm confident they'll get that done within the next few years. We've always been focused on having muscling in these cattle because we think it's important for the cow to have some meat to her to get through a rough winter, and that adds value there. But their research would show that ribeye alone is not a great indicator of overall carcass muscling. So, when we select the bulls we're using, we want cattle that got some visible muscle in their hip and rear quarter and in their forearm. And that's always been something we've looked at. And it's not just the Sim Angus cattle. Of course, they've got more muscle and cutability on average than the Angus, but I feel like our Angus cattle got more visible muscle than a lot of the competition. And, we're going to continue to select cattle that do have meat and muscle in them and will hold up and last in the cow herd.
Yeah. Jeremy, I want to go back to you because I asked you the same question, and it somewhat comes back a little bit to your previous answers. We were talking about some of the decisions you guys make from a financial standpoint, and longevity being one of those, just out of pure necessity from a financial point of view. One of the things you said is, you guys have been doing this now for a few years. You're really comfortable with your females that you've got out there. Now it's just a matter of kind of maybe filling in the gaps a little bit, but doing that through utilizing technology. And explain a little bit about what you're doing there.
Yeah, I think we approach that from a technology standpoint and on a lot of levels. First and foremost, the genomics on the EPD side, on the genetic evaluation side. Then we also are using a lot of technology. As those cattle enter the feedlot, we feed all of our home-raised non-replacement cattle and quite a few customer cattle. And so we're trying to utilize the best implant programs, the best beta agonist programs, the best grids to market those cattle on, just every step of the way trying to make sure that we're capturing the value that's there. And we found that with consistent selection in that direction that we can certainly change the amount of carcass weight we can produce relative to the mature weight of our cows. And we can do so with minimal, if any, additional cost at the ranch level and quite a bit more top line return at the feedlot level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to talk about your guys' upcoming sales. Stockman's Source coming up on the 7th of February. This year, offering about 185 head of coming 2-year-old bulls. Travis, I want you to explain a little bit because you said that there's this year maybe just a little bit more than normal. Some that could be used on some virgin heifers.
Yeah, I think we had a little, maybe a few more or a higher percentage of bulls that are suitable for heifers. And I'm not sure if we planned it that way or not, but that's kind of the way it looks. It looks like it's turned out to me. So, and that wouldn't be just Angus bulls. There's quite a few Sim Angus bulls that will work on virgin heifers, and we feel like they'll give you a little more calf in the end than that straight bred Angus calf. So
yeah, Jeremy, what else can you offer as we talk about what you have in terms of the bulls coming up here in this year's sale?
Yeah, I think we're just same as every year. We've tried to be pretty tough on the bulls and pretty selective on the bulls. We're the kind of ranch where the steer check matters because we've sorted pretty hard on them, and we're trying to make these bulls the best financial decision our customers can make too, right? We want them to go out and do their job and do it for many years and build a cow herd that models those same traits for them that we prefer in ours. And so we're trying to make not only the right financial decisions for us, but a product that is the right financial decision for our customer.
Yeah. When we started our conversation before we went on air here today, I'd made a comment, and you guys have talked about this in the past. We hadn't really talked about it now, but I just made the comment because I know you guys, when you're developing these bulls, it's really from a range developed type bull. Travis, that's, as I was saying, I mean, you can take a range animal and you can take them to a lot of different environments, but you can't go the other way around. And that's been kind of the focus of your guys is developing on these cattle, not only your maternal cattle, but your bulls you're selling, is the fact that these are raised in kind of range conditions.
Yeah, Justin, these 2-year-old bulls spent their first winter as yearlings on corn stalks with the distiller supplement in big groups. And that really sorts out the poor doers, and those end up in the steer pen. Hopefully there's not too many of those, but there are some. Mm-hmm. And then they spent some time on rye in the spring, and then they grazed native range all summer and were pulled back into big traps where they can walk and exercise this fall, and that's where there'll be sale day. At these price levels, it's more than ever, it's important that these bulls last several seasons for our customers to amortize that cost over more calf crops. And yeah, sure, every once in a while there's something that happens with the bull, but on average, the feedback we get is these guys get a lot of seasons of use. I mean, sometimes they'll tell us about a 9-year-old bull they got standing around, and I'm not sure we need to use them that long, but it's good to know that they can take it if you put them to the test.
Yeah. Jeremy, let's go through the details of the sale. Again, I said it's the 7th of February. What else? As far as I know, it's at your place there, southwest of North Platte. Give us more details on it.
Yeah, so Saturday afternoon, February 7th at the ranch, heated sale facility, which was new a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And, or new to us a couple years ago. And bulls will be pinned there right next to the sale barn. We do the sale on video. It's kind of a quiet auction, cowboy auction type deal. It's been a method that our customers seem to prefer thus far. We'll get right through them pretty fast. There'll be right around 185 bulls, and I think there's probably something that fits a lot of people there.
Yeah, you bet. So again, ssbeefbulls.com. That is the website. You can go. There's a catalog. In fact, I'm looking at it right now here on my computer, a catalog, and it'll be 3:00 Central Time, viewing at noon. Also DV auction, Cattle USA, a lot of different ways they can do that. And so, guys, just real quick, maybe a couple final comments.
Yeah, if you've not heard of us before, we'd just love for you to reach out to us. I think our numbers are listed there in the catalog. You can find it online. We'd just love to discuss further what makes our deal unique and how we think it could be a good fit for you. So just please reach out to us.
You bet. Jeremy?
Yeah, I'm just going to mention, I think the thing that I am most happy with is I look around the room sale day and I see some ranchers that I really look up to and admire, and I think are just outstanding at what they do. And that's been the most gratifying thing for me, is just getting the sense that our clientele is really sound ranch managers.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, appreciate you joining us here. Folks, it's Stockman Source Bull Sale coming up the 7th of February. Mark that in your calendar. You can catch it on DV Auction. If you can't be there, it's going to be at the ranch located southwest in North Platte, Nebraska, about 35 miles or so. You can catch it on Cattle USA DV Auction. Travis Chrisman, Jeremy Martin joining us here today on the program. Guys, good to have you here.
Good to be here. Thank you, sir.
You bet. And again, if you'd like to download the sale catalog or take a look at what they've got on there for contact information for both Jeremy or Travis, you can go to their website at ssbeefbulls.com is the website. And as I sit here and just look at the catalog, it make me realize we didn't really talk about this that much, but these are coming 2-year-old Angus and Sim Angus bulls. So these are a little older bulls, something we didn't talk about, but there's not very many guys that sell that age of bulls. So there you go. Take a look for yourself at their website, ssbeefbulls.com. Stay with us. We're going to take a look at our long-range weather coming up next. This segment today brought to you by Ambrook. You know, how many of us in the ranching business are making six-figure decisions without knowing which parts of your operation are actually making money? Now, if you're juggling, say, a cow-calf operation, or maybe you have a backgrounding enterprise, a haying enterprise, custom grazing, throw family partners in there, I can tell you, spreadsheets and QuickBooks is going to be really tough to really show you true profitability and at the same time also keep inventory straight. With Ambrook, you're going to get real-time enterprise level clarity. What I'm talking about is cost per head or per acre or per enterprise, plus ag-specific inventory management from feed to inputs and your livestock. You can tag transactions all from the convenience of your phone, get same-day balance sheets, and instantly see what's profitable and what's bleeding you dry. If you want to try out Ambrook for 1 month, here's what you can do. You can go to ambrook.com/ranch. You can get 1 month free trial by going to their website. Again, it's ambrook.com. That's ambrook.com/ranch. Today's Long Range Weather brought to you by Long Range Cattle Dewormer with 150 days of parasite protection in just one single dose. Give your cattle a head start this year using Long Range Cattle Dewormer. Find out more at longrangedewormer.com. Well, as we turn now and take a look at our long range weather, joining us is meteorologist Don Day. And Don, I'll tell you, it's been a little bit unique for a lot of us here in the country because this cold spell that for a lot of us, maybe in my neck of the woods, are somewhat used to, but it's been really labored and long into the central and southeast part of the country, but it's going to go away at some point.
It will go away at some point. And I will say this, we're going to see some ups and downs, and the opportunity to still have some really cold weather as we go into February is still on the table. But certainly the last half of January, a lot of folks will remember that period of time east of the Mississippi and across the deep south, one of the iciest, snowiest, and coldest Januaries they could probably remember in quite a while.
Yeah, it was. That's what I've heard as well too. So when we look into looking ahead out to a few weeks out, and that's going to put us more into the middle part of February, what do you anticipate the weather to look like across the country?
Well, what we're likely going to see is a reloading of the northern hemisphere, meaning reloading of the Arctic air building up again. After so much Arctic air gets released, like what we saw at the end of January there's a bit of a readjustment that takes place. And what we do see towards the middle of February and maybe extending into early March is probably one more episode where the Arctic is going to be throwing some stuff across the lower 48. It does look like there's a possibility that some of that cold could end up further west, and the central and western states could experience maybe a little bit of what they've been experiencing in the east.
Okay.
We expect that is something in the second half of February into early March. It's on the table.
Yeah, I think a little bit, and it's kind of a give and take, because you could say, like, I would say west of where the big latest cold snap hasn't necessarily seen a tremendous amount of moisture with everything that's happened. And while we are okay with that, we're also thinking, well, at some point we are going to need moisture.
Yeah, I mean, and for good concerns, because usually in the winter, if you're not cold, you're not wet. And that really has been the case across a lot of the Western High Plains, all the way into the Great Basin, all the way to the Pacific Northwest. And even though there was a very wet period in California in December, things have gotten dry. And I've heard from some folks who are a little concerned about, what is my spring grass going to be looking like? Is this going to get going? Mm-hmm. And I think there's every reason to be concerned about that. Now, if you look at climatology, you look at how patterns evolve, as we get into late February, March, and April, we tend to see storms get a little more productive in terms of what they can produce with both rain and snow, because you're introducing, by the time we get into that time frame, you start to get some air from the lower latitudes getting further north. We're noticing the days are getting longer now. Mm-hmm. We've gotten past the shortest day of the year. So there's good reason why when we get into that March, April, May timeframe, you tend to get into the more productive storms. And right now, there's no indication that we won't have those. The one thing that has happened here over the last couple of weeks has been the erosion of La Nina. it's pretty much gone, and we're going to see a rapid warm up in the subtropical waters in the Pacific. That's a signal. That's something that does lend itself to better precipitation as we get into late winter and early spring. So there are some things that we're looking at that would suggest that, yes, it's very dry in the West. I mean, just crazy dry in some areas. You look at places like Utah and parts of Colorado and the Intermountain West that has been so dry. There is the possibility that that could change and that things could start to get going again in terms of precipitation and more productive storms.
Yeah. Well, and the other conversation when I've had this with people is like you and I have talked about the analog years that we're referencing back a little bit to would be 10, 11, 13, and 14. And I'm reminding those folks that, it did come back. We did have a pretty moist spring and adequate moisture.
One thing to remember is in a lot of the United States, you can survive a dry winter if your spring and summer is good, but you can't have a good summer with a bad spring.
Yeah.
So, those spring months are the money months in a lot of the central and western United States, and we still aren't there yet. And a lot of times when you do have a dry winter season, not every year that happens does that mean a dry spring or summer. There's not a strong correlation that a dry winter equals a dry spring or summer.
Yeah. Well, Don, appreciate the update, and we look forward to catching up with you next time.
Sounds good.
And that was meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-range weather. If you want to tune in each and every morning to his daily video weather podcast, you can go to his website at dayweather.com. There's a link there to get to his YouTube channel, or you can find it on YouTube as well.
Fascinated by our wild weather? Now you can learn, appreciate, and understand the weather in your own backyard with the new Tropo Rain Gauge. Having achieved the highest rating of any product reviewed by the weatherstationexperts.com, the Tropo boasts rugged durability, impeccable accuracy, and precision to the 100th of an inch. Visit measurerain.com to order a Tropo today and use code RAINDAY. That's RAINDAY for free shipping and 10% off. Go to measurerain.com.
Raising and feeding cattle is a high-stakes game. Respiratory disease only raises the risks. Choosing Resflor Gold, Florfenicol, and Flunixin Meglumine from Merck Animal Health as your BRD treatment helps shift the odds. The fast-acting dual therapy reduces fever and fights infection at the source for visible recovery within 6 hours. Don't gamble with BRD. Bet on gold. Learn more at resflorgold.com. Animals intended for human consumption must not be slaughtered within 38 days of treatment. This product is not approved for use in female dairy cattle 20 months of age or older, including dry dairy cows.
It's more than a convention. It's where the cattle industry comes together. CattleCon 2026 is heading to downtown Nashville, February 3rd through February 5th. Gain insights from top cattle industry experts, connect with fellow producers, and take part in shaping the future of our business. Plus, world-class entertainment and inspiring keynote speakers. Whether you're there for the business, the education, or the good times, CattleCon is where it all comes together. Register today at convention.ncda.org.
I know I mentioned this earlier in the show, but we are going to be at the upcoming 2026 Cattle Convention in Nashville, Tennessee. And if you're going to be there, make sure you stop by the Working Ranch Magazine booth and say hello to everyone with Working Ranch Magazine and with the Working Ranch Radio Show. The Captain Tim O'Byrne, he will be there as well. So be sure, stop by, say hello, and also register for our grand prize drawings that we are having there. I'm not going to tell you what they are. You're going to have to stop by and see for yourself. All I can say, it's going to be well worth it. So make sure you stop in if you're at the upcoming 2026 Cattle Convention in Nashville, Tennessee. By the way, if you hear something on the show you want repeated back, you can always find all of our programs by going to our site at workingranchradio.com or any podcast provider that you have. If you have comments, questions, ideas for show topics, or guests that you'd like us to interview, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is justin.workingranch@gmail.com. And also be sure to leave us a rating or a review. We appreciate that as well. The Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers. Thanks for tuning in and joining us this week. I'm Justin Mills, and until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.